So it's 1993, audiences were being wowed by Jurassic Park, WWF's Monday Night Raw aired for the first time, and Intel shipped its first Pentium processor. For gamers, 1993 was a busy one. The 3DO was launched, promising much and destined for disappointment, while Mortal Kombat 2, Aladdin, and Star Fox were wowing gamers on the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis consoles. id Software had successfully taken the gaming world by storm in 1992. Wolfenstein 3D shattered expectations and proved to be a monumental hit, one that the entire video games industry took notice of. In the shadow of Wolfenstein 3D's release, many games tried to emulate that success on PC and consoles, but id Software was already moving on, not content to retread worn ground. The big question for the team at id Software was a daunting one. How do you follow up a game that changed the industry? With the weight of expectation now on their shoulders and the world watching, there was no room for failure. The journey to this next game wouldn't be easy. 18 months of development filled with arguments, firings, hirings, egos clashing, and a studio that would change dramatically. But the game they would eventually release would be unlike anything seen before, a game that would not just supersede Wolfenstein 3D but make it feel antiquated in comparison, a game that even over 30 years later is still enjoying great success and regularly cited as one of the biggest influences in all of gaming. That game was Doom. After the release of Wolfenstein 3D in mid-1992, the team at id Software split their focus. While development continued on Wolfenstein 3D's Spear of Destiny, Carmack continued to make additions and tweaks to the Wolfenstein 3D engine, which had been licensed to Raven Software for the upcoming Shadowcaster game. He would also begin technical research into the next iteration of the engine. This would eventually form the basis for their next major release. It was accepted that another Wolfenstein game was out of the question. The team at id Software were ready to move on from that franchise completely. The idea of returning to Commander Keen, one of the team's earliest outings, was repeatedly pushed by Tom Hall, but it was unanimously shot down by everyone else. The team wanted to work on something darker and more edgier, a game directly inspired by the Dungeons & Dragons games. It was John Carmack that came up with the original idea for Doom. The idea of using technology to fight demons appealed to the team and it was quickly accepted. Development on what would become Doom officially began in November 1992 with an expanded team including Adrian Carmack, Kevin Cloud, Tom Hall, John Romero and others helping to lay the groundwork. Internally, the game was called Green and Pissed, a reference to the 1986 movie The Color of Money. During this time, the team moved into their own dedicated office space, affectionately referred to as Suite 666. They also made the decision to cut ties with Apogee Software, the publishing partner for Wolfenstein 3D. Wolf 3D had achieved immense sales and the team at id Software felt that they didn't see enough of the rewards from that. By self-publishing their next game, they would be able to keep any and all sales made. In early 1993, id Software put out a press release announcing the development of Doom. It touted multiplayer, multiple characters, and even stated, id Software's Doom promises to push back the boundaries of what was thought possible on a 386 SX or better computer. This was the first time the world heard about Doom. As the ideas began to flow for Doom, the game went through many iterations and phases in its development. Tom Hall, who was serving as the lead designer on Doom, wanted to incorporate more fantastical elements into the upcoming game, as well as a stronger focus on character and story. Wolf 3D had story, but it was window dressing that most gamers simply ignored. Outside of simple splash screens, the story was an afterthought. To assist with this, Tom Hall created the Doom Bible, a 79-page document that outlined a detailed backstory and world for the upcoming Doom game. He wanted Doom to take place in a large military base on the planet Tea Tenga. Hall envisioned the game having character soldiers, 6 episodes, and a seamless world that would see the characters move between planets and hell. Combined with Carmack's desire for Doom to be a seamless, more open world experience, Doom was shaping up to be a very different kind of game from Wolfenstein 3D. The problem with this was the rest of the team at id Software didn't share Hall's vision for the game. Romero pushed for a more brutal and fast game. He did not like the idea of a character-driven plot bogging down the experience. Hall had already begun developing levels based on his Doom Bible, trying to bring that vision of the game to life. These levels were critiqued by Carmack and Romero, who both felt that his attempts to copy real-life based aesthetics didn't showcase the improvements in the new engine. In particular, they didn't like how it made the game feel very close to Wolfenstein 3D with its angular corridors.
Mainly with Tom, because I was writing the tool to make the levels, and Tom was the one making levels, but he wasn't really inspired. Tom was already not happy because Tom is not a kill kind of guy. Tom is keen, right? And Tom is not Doom or Wolfenstein. So he was not inspired already. And while we were making the game, and Tom was making his levels, first he was making them like Wolfenstein levels, but it had diminished lighting built into the engine, so it did get kind of darker and everything.
He went on to develop his own, more abstract levels that received praise from the team. One of Romero's beliefs was that the lighting and contrast in height in Doom levels would be one of the key differentiators from Wolfenstein 3D, which didn't have varied lighting in its levels. John Carmack was reportedly one of the more fierce in their resistance to Tom Hall's Doom Bible, famously stating during a discussion on the topic, "Story in a game is like story in a porn movie. It's expected to be there, but it's not that important." Early alphas and betas for the game showcase a multitude of ideas that were experimented with but ultimately scrapped from the game. Other characters feature in the game, a life system, a scoring system, and a much greater influence from RPGs such as an inventory system and secondary armor for the player to manage. All of these would eventually be scrapped in pursuit of Doom being as fast-paced as possible. Eventually, the rest of the team at id would outright reject Tom's Doom Bible, feeling that it didn't assist the game that they were building. The sentiment was that the Bible emphasized realism over exciting gameplay and it harmed the game that they were crafting. Carmack and Hall were at loggerheads constantly over a number of features. Tensions got so strained that Hall started avoiding going into the office, feeling that his input wasn't being respected or valued. With relations strained and the game's release looming ever closer, the decision was made among the rest of the team at id Software that Tom Hall had to go, something that Romero initially pushed back against but accepted once it became clear that Hall's vision didn't align with the rest of the team. The breaking point came during a hastily arranged company meeting in August 1993 where Tom Hall was unanimously removed from id Software, his vision for Doom deemed too out of sync with the rest of the team. He would be replaced by Sandy Peterson a month later, the man who would arguably go on to have the largest input over the retail levels in Doom 1 and Doom 2. There were concerns over Sandy's age initially. He was notably older than the rest of the team, and came from a religious background, not something you would assume would mesh with a game about demons. Peterson was tasked with redesigning Hall's levels, while Romero worked alongside him to construct the remaining levels in time for the game's release. With the promise of a third quarter 1993 release slipping by, the team at id Software got to work on finishing the game ready for the end of 1993. Bringing together the chaotic development into a cohesive title took a lot of effort. Many of the game features were only formed in the final months of development. It's been stated that the biggest cinematic influences to Doom were the Evil Dead and Alien movie franchises. Monsters and the game's design were handled by Adrian Carmack, who used a mixture of sculpted models and photos to create digitized sprites. Various images from around the id Software studios were used for textures. Bobby Prince was brought back in after his work on Wolfenstein 3D to compose the music and create the sound effects of Doom. Doom's soundtrack would take direct inspiration from metal bands such as Pantera and Alice in Chains, resulting in a blend of techno-metal music. Prince did not create the music for specific levels. Romero would assign music to each of the levels late in the game's development. The monster sounds in the game were created using animal noises, while other sounds were taken from various collections, such as Sound Ideas Series 6000 audio collection. John Carmack has stated in interviews over the years that one of his major desires with Doom was to make it easily moddable. When Wolfenstein 3D was created, the idea of fans creating custom content wasn't really considered. The files were not stored in a way that made accessing them easy, yet Wolfenstein 3D fans did just that. They used this to not only make level editors, they replaced enemies and weapons within the game. Carmack and the team at id Software loved this and wanted to encourage it. When creating Doom, they made use of a file format called WAD, Where's All the Data. This would serve as an easy way for files within the game's files to be customized and changed, allowing for fans to dive in and create more Doom content. The other big desire, multiplayer, came late in Doom's development. Carmack taught himself about computer networking from a book. Once the mod was up and running, Romero coined the term deathmatch for their 4-player multiplayer sessions and pushed for a cooperative mode to be included. The final weeks of Doom's development were marked by a huge crunch as the team pushed to get the game over the line. This was achieved on December 10, 1993. The team uploaded the shareware episode of Doom to the University of Wisconsin's FTP server, where thousands of eager gamers were waiting to get their hands on Doom, so much so that they crashed the server repeatedly as they waited patiently to get their hands on the game. It's been said by members of id Software that at its peak, 10,000 people attempted to download the game when the file had been uploaded successfully. To help spread Doom further, the team at id Software encouraged gaming stores to sell box copies of the shareware version of Doom for $9, letting them keep 100% of the profit. This encouraged many stores to stock the game as it was pure profit for them. For id Software, it meant more people played Doom and more people potentially ordering the full game experience to see the rest of what it had to offer. It's a strategy that will work out very well for the studio. The story of Doom sees the player take control of a nameless Marine who has found himself stationed on Mars after assaulting a senior officer, the Marine refusing to fire upon civilians. These experiments resulted in interdimensional space travel between the two moons. However, these teleports became unstable and those using them became insane. Things escalated rapidly as garbled messages from Phobos called for military aid. Something had gone very wrong. Soon after, Deimos disappeared from the sky completely. After being left to guard the perimeter alone while his team went inside to secure the base, hours of anguished screams and wails filled the Marine's ear as he could only listen to his comrades being destroyed. With only a pistol left for him and a base full of pissed off demons awaiting him inside, the Marine had no option but to fight through the base. Eventually he faced off against the Barons of Hell and defeated the gatekeepers guarding the teleporter. When the Marine stepped through the teleporter, he was ambushed by a horde of demons. When he awakened, he found himself on the lost moon of Deimos. At its core, Doom is a running, gunning game that tasks the player with shooting hordes of enemies, zombies and demons in order to reach the end of a level. On the way to the end of a level, the player will collect keys, weapons and power-ups to aid them. Unlike Wolfenstein 3D, Doom's levels feature all manner of room sizes, shaped and crafted across multiple planes. Stairs are a constant feature of the game, as are teleporters and lifts to move the player around, all adding to the variety of the overall experience. In the initial release, there were 4 difficulty settings available to the player, I'm Too Young to Die being the easiest, and Ultraviolence being the most difficult. In subsequent updates to the game, the team at id Software added in the Nightmare difficulty, a response to those players who said that the game was too easy. In the shareware version of the game, there are 6 enemies the player can encounter. The former human, a pistol-wielding former Marine who serves as cannon fodder for the most part but can chip away your health if left to their own devices. The former human sergeant, a shotgun-holding menace who can deal serious damage up close if the player is unprepared. The Imp, a brown demon covered in spikes who can launch fireballs across large distances and scratch the player if they get too close. The Demon, a pink ball of chaos who acts as a meat shield and can take a big chomp out of the player if they get too close, also affectionately known as a Pinky. Spectres, the same as demons but invisible, making them a particular pain in darkened rooms. And then finally there's the Baron of Hell, the boss of Knee Deep in the Dead. This meatbag can claw the player aggressively and also launch powerful green fireballs at the player, which are very nasty. In the full version of the game, the roster of enemies expands to include 4 more enemies. The Lost Soul. This floating flaming skull is an absolute nuisance. It can float in the air and charge at the player aggressively, causing annoyance and damage. The Cacodemon, a floating meatball with horns. It may move slow through the air, but its powerful strikes can be a nightmare up close, and it can also launch fireballs when it needs to. In groups, these things are an absolute menace. The Cyberdemon. Its ominous roar is the first sign of trouble. The boss of the Shores of Hell comes packing a rocket launcher and a huge health bar for the player to deal with. And then finally there's the Spider Mastermind, the big boss of Ultimate Doom. The Spider Mastermind has a chain gun cannon attached to it which you can use to shred players from a great distance. To fight these enemies, ThatNukemGuy has an arsenal of weapons available to make use of. Shareware gamers got to experience 6 weapons from the game, including the fists, a chainsaw, a pistol, a single barrel shotgun, a chain gun and a rocket launcher. The full version of the game allowed players to make use of the plasma rifle and the BFG 9000. When Doom released in December 1993, many gamers acquired the game through an internet download or by buying the shareware version from retail stores. The shareware version of Doom 1 comes bundled with Knee Deep in the Dead, 9 levels that saw ThatNukemGuy battling through the UAC base on Phobos. The Shores of Hell and Inferno formed the rest of the original Doom 1 package and were only available to players who purchased the game via mail order. The Shores of Hell sees ThatNukemGuy exploring the missing moon of Deimos, fighting his way to the Tower of Babel, which is constructed as you complete each level, and taking down the Cyber Demon. Inferno sees the player climb to Hell itself and battle through the demon's homeland, taking down the evil within and eventually facing off against the Spider Mastermind. Upon defeating the Spider Mastermind, a door opens and ThatNukemGuy enters. The portal takes him home to Earth, where he discovers the demons have already begun their invasion of Earth and killed ThatNukemGuy's pet rabbit Daisy in the process. This is where Doom 1 originally ended, however it was not the end of Doom 1's story. In 1995, Doom finally made its way to retail stores as part of a big box compilation. Previously, the only way to purchase retail Doom was via mail order. This was overseen by GT Interactive, who handled publishing duties for the game. The updated version of Doom 1 saw the game being renamed to The Ultimate Doom and added in a 4th episode titled Die Flesh Consumed. This saw 9 new levels being added into the game, with John Romero, American McGee and Sean Green leading the design. Romero would also recruit members of the Doom community to help flesh out the roster of levels. John Anderson, known as Dr. Sleep in the community, and Tim Willits, who would go on to become a long-term member of the id Software family. The episode was also made available as a free update to those who had already purchased Doom 1. Several new textures were created for this expansion and updates were made to the Doom 1 engine, bringing in fast-closing doors which actually debuted in Doom 2. Romero also made a slight change to Knee Deep in the Dead's hangar level, adding in a switch to make the level more accessible in multiplayer. The episode does not make use of Doom 2 enemies, nor does it bring in the super shotgun from that game. In order to fit this episode into the lore of Doom and Doom 2, it serves as both a sequel to Doom's final episode, Infernal, while also serving as a prequel to Doom 2. The story of this episode simply suggests that upon defeating the Spider Mastermind, ThatNukemGuy was too late to stop the Legions of Hell as they'd already begun rampaging through Earth's cities, setting the stage for Doom 2 at the conclusion of the episode. For me, the greatest strength Doom has as a game is its core gameplay loop. The mixture of fast-paced movement, intelligent enemies who react to what you're doing, and varied level design that varies the size and scale of encounters and stops things from getting too samey. Marrying these three ingredients together in such a way creates an endless satisfaction loop that even in the modern day, many games fail to deliver on the same level. What stuck out to me as a kid when I was playing Doom compared to a lot of games released around that time is how little fluff there was around the core gameplay. Getting started on a Doom run takes mere seconds from loading into the game to jumping into the action. There are no cutscenes, no dialogue, no attempt to slow down the gameplay in order to relay what the overarching plot is. Doom relegates all of that to the end of the episodes, and even there it's treated as a background element that you can skip through. Anything that acts as a barrier to the gameplay is trimmed down and minimalised to ensure the quickest route to the gameplay. This is both a blessing and a curse for the game. A blessing because it makes the gameplay of Doom the main experience. It pushes the player into the action with nothing holding them down, and even new players not getting bogged down by information or having to remember key details for hours on end. You can't ever accuse Doom of hiding its gameplay from the player or its critics. It's a curse though because it means Doom relies entirely on that gameplay loop hooking the player in. If there are any issues on the player's side regarding gameplay or controls, Doom doesn't have a second hook to grab those players with. Doom is pretty brutal in terms of the way it teaches players aspects of the gameplay. A lot of the game's hazards aren't signaled to the player until they're closing in on them. There's no in-game breakdown of what enemies can and can't do. These experiences have to be lived, usually through the flames of bitter failure, and while in 1990s first-person shooters that was the norm, in modern times it can be a bit of a brick wall for newcomers. I don't have an issue with this at all. As a 5-year-old, I learned all that and more, and came out the other side being a lifelong fan of Doom. But I can also understand how for some modern players who are arriving from modern shooters, that kind of lack of instruction and direction is a reason many turn away from Doom and never look back. Put simply, Doom is very much a product of its time, warts and all. Modern source ports and depictions of the game have done their best to address these issues, but even these, on a fundamental level, can't add back in story where there wasn't one to begin with. Once you learn the gameplay and understand the limitations in which they operate, Doom takes on a life of its own and will hook you in for the long haul, but it has to get you with that hook or there's nothing else to see here. And that's what Doom is and always has been. For better or worse, Doom is an adrenaline rush that rides its gameplay to the bitter end. And let's be clear, these limitations do age Doom at its core. Take the lack of mouse look and vertical look within Doom. It's a convenient modern addition that later Doom engine games added in, and some insist upon it when they play Doom, but returning to any port that doesn't include that can age the experience. Doom compensates for this by adequately shooting bullets generally where the player needs them to go, but this creates its own issues as sometimes rockets can fire into floors and damage the player unexpectedly. There are also some quirks from the original engine that carry over into the modern experience. Issues like enemies being infinitely tall also exist within older versions of the game and can drastically alter the experience, making it more frustrating for those who aren't prepared. For me though, the gameplay in Doom never gets super boring because the variety of enemies and combinations in which they're used provide an almost endless well of potential for new encounters. Every room in Doom is filled with different enemies in different locations, doing different things. Each room is crafted to ensure that encounters with those enemies are different from what came before. The range of weapons offered up to the player are insanely satisfying and give the player a choice in how they handle those encounters. Is it really a good idea to save that ammo for the room with the pinkies, or do you feel brave and want to take out your berserk powered punch? Choices like this vary from player to player, playthrough to playthrough. It means that no two experiences of Doom are ever quite the same because the scale of playstyles offered up to the player is so wide and varied. You can approach each level with care, attention and a slow pace, taking down enemies carefully as you like. You can also rip and tear, gung-ho all the way through and empty a weapon into everything inside a room. The game provides enough ammo and choice for both to be viable approaches, and it's that versatility that gives Doom an edge. There's a risk-reward to Doom that punishes players who go over the top with their playstyle, but it also feeds more into that central gameplay loop. As players pour into the room and the ammo count begins to diminish, it's moments where you're on the edge and about to die that truly define what Doom is. Even death in Doom isn't a barrier to the gameplay experience. Dying simply kicks you back to the start of a level and removes all your weapons, bar the pistol. Outside of that, you can take as many attempts as you want to get through a level, and because the game doesn't punish constant saving, players can lean on the save system as a crutch and relive the encounters as much as they like. Unlike Wolfenstein 3D, which clung to its life system and kicked players out of an episode if they were overzealous, Doom encourages one more try gameplay. These considered additions to the game help mitigate some of the more egregious difficulty spikes. Doom is a game that isn't afraid to turn up the heat, and when playing on high difficulties, enemies can quickly overwhelm a player if they're not paying attention or not ready. Levels can spring traps and you'll only find out about them when the enemy is chewing your face off or clawing you from behind. Sure, sometimes the traps can be cheap and a bit cumbersome, but at the same time they also act as a fun way to keep the player on their toes. If things are going super well in Doom, it usually means a wall is about to open in an attempt to change that. This isn't to say that Doom doesn't foreshadow or use its spaces effectively. I'd argue that Doom makes great use of height differences and the lighting to convey a sense of terror. These tools simply weren't available in Wolfenstein 3D, but in Doom they enhance every aspect of the experience. Just load into E1M1 hangar and within seconds you can see varied roof heights, different textures on different parts of the level, a window which overlooks an outdoor area, teasing blue armour from the word go, and a set of stairs with green armour on top of it. Levels in Doom love to tease the player, and the curious are rewarded richly with new weapons, more ammo or power-ups to help push their way through the next part of the game. Windows usually overlook seemingly unreachable areas, but in most cases, if you can see into a space, there's usually a way to get into that space. It also speaks to the quality of attention to detail in some levels that a lot of storytelling is done through the use of textures and objects placed in the world. In Need Even the Dead, you'll constantly find bodies of your fallen comrades strewn throughout the base. Their deaths and corpses are a reminder of the danger that these levels provide. As the game progresses, the use of textures allows for hints at deeper lore. E2M8 features Barons of Hell hung from the wall. These were the bosses of the previous episode, and yet they're being used as decorations here. It foreshadows the sheer terror that is the Cyberdemon. Yet despite all this, the biggest issue facing Doom for me is its inconsistent level design. It's easy to laugh at this notion if you've been playing Doom for so many years, but so many of its levels leap from great fun to confusing labyrinths so quickly that new players can easily be sucked into its darkened corners. It's nowhere near as bad as Wolfenstein 3D, where every other room looked similar to the next, and exploration at times became a chore. But Doom does have its moments of opaque level design, staggeringly awkward layouts, alongside some particularly weird choices. A lot of this can be attributed to the game's weird development cycle that saw most of its levels only completed in the final months before the game's release. The quality of some of these levels shine through, but other levels fail to hit those standards. This isn't me saying that all the levels are bad. What it is me saying is that Doom 1 has a lot of levels that probably would be a lot better if they'd been given a bit more time to develop and iron out the rough edges. It would also make the overall experiences through the episodes a lot more consistent. Knee Deep in the Dead is arguably the most consistent of the episodes and has a fairly high bar for quality across the board. Romero's body of work is mainly on showcase here, and it does a lot of the heavy lifting in Doom 1. It manages to marry the space-based aesthetic to layouts that are genuinely fun to poke around and explore. A lot of what makes Doom 1 so memorable is tucked away in these levels, and I think that if I was to pick one episode to share with someone, it would be this one. So it's a good thing this was the shareware episode that most people played for free. The Shows of Hell is a bit of an odd one. It isn't much worse, but it has less focused levels and has more of an identity crisis, unable to decide if it wants to have bases, cathedrals, or weird corrupt locales. In the end, all three get thrown together fairly frequently, and gamers are treated to both the most varied episode in terms of visuals and also probably the most forgettable outing in terms of quality. It also has some of the more labyrinthy layouts in Doom, and I feel that it sometimes pushes a bit too hard into that. It's really Inferno that stubs its toe trying to cross the finish line. It's clear that Peterson really wanted to use this episode for experimentation, but the end result is an episode that's all over the place in terms of quality, not just level to level, but sometimes within the levels themselves. In my opinion, two of the worst levels in Doom reside in this episode. Unholy Cathedral and Gateway to Limbo showcase what happens when concept overtakes execution. The use of teleporters as a core concept in Doom levels is dangerous at the best of times, but when these levels lean way too aggressively into teleporters, it drags the entire experience down to the ground. I doubt many players booted up Doom in 1993 hoping to get frustrated by awkwardly placed teleporter puzzles. Overall, Inferno really struggles to hold a consistent level quality, and while it gives a brief glimpse of what Doom Hell can achieve, Mount Erebus and Pandemonium being the standout levels, ultimately fails to deliver the same quality as what came before. Visually though, I feel Inferno is definitely the most interesting of the three episodes. Visuals across the board in Doom have aged somewhat better than a lot of games from around the time it was released. There's enough variety in the different episodes to make clear where you are. The tech bases are a mixture of greys and browns, laced with toxic floors and a skybox that seems friendly. As you move through the episodes, the skybox changes, the textures become more gothic with green bricks, metal insignias, and eventually fleshy textures in hell. All of this is complemented by decorations that help to convey the horror of the space you're in. One thing as well that I really appreciate about Doom is that each enemy basically has its own silhouette. It sounds like such a simple thing to say, but when you enter a large room, you can instantly tell which enemy is sat across the room from you because the design of the enemies is so tight and so well presented that the player only has to hear the distant roar to know what they're up against. The use of shadows and lighting also adds a lot to Doom and adds infinitely to the overall experience. I'd argue some levels overindulge in shadows and that can lead to confusion and awkwardness, in particular when combined with mean monster placement. At the same time, it's a very welcome feature that makes Doom feel all the more richer as you explore it. Another key improvement over Wolfenstein 3D is movement. ThatNukemGuy moves super slick, able to move around and weave between enemies in a chaotic ballet of fury and blood. It feels more fluid and fast paced when racing around the levels. It doesn't feel quite as awkward, although I will say openly I was never a fan of the original mouse controls when the game released, and I always used keyboard only. Luckily this has been fixed in various source ports over the years. And while he can't jump or crouch, ThatNukemGuy can run with enough speed that basic platforming is possible, but this is one of the areas where Doom has always struggled for me. Bobby Prince went above and beyond in creating iconic soundtracks that range from adrenaline pushing through to suspenseful and intense. Ultimate Doom's soundtrack contains so many great outings, and I have to applaud John Romero for choosing the right tracks for the levels that deserve them. In almost all the cases, the levels and the music go hand in hand, and I just can't imagine playing Doom without these tracks. The sounds used in the game are also very well done. Guns fired by the player pack a great punch, each unique and fitting. There's clearly a lot of thought that went into making sure the sounds do their jobs. I'd argue that they do this because you can easily hear doors opening in the distance, enemies skulking around and searching for you, as well as distant gunfire when enemies begin to infight. It was quite terrifying to play Doom as a kid, knowing enemies could spring out of anywhere. Sound is a key component to the Doom experience, and I feel that it's arguably the most underrated component that brings the whole package together. The ability to set up games across local networks and the ease of achieving this saw Doom become a staple of office spaces around the world, to the point where many large companies like Microsoft had to ban the game outright during work hours. Considering that Wolfenstein 3D did not include any kind of multiplayer mode, it's amazing that they achieved so much on the first outing. Critical reaction to Doom was strong across the board. Many reviewers praised the technical feats the game achieved. Its blend of fast-paced gameplay and atmosphere, stunning visuals, and strong multiplayer made the game a powerhouse offering. Electronic Entertainment called it a skull-banging, palm-sweating, blood-pounding game, while the reviewer over at The Age newspaper said it was a technically superb, thrilling 3D adventure. PC Zone named it as the best multiplayer game available. Doom received Game of the Year awards from the likes of Computer Gaming World, PC Gamer, Games Radar, while many other outlets named it the Game of the Decade. Edge's review stated that Doom made serious advances in what people expect in 3D games of the future, surpassing not only prior games but games they've yet to be released, but also critiques the game for its straightforward shooting, stating, "If you could only talk to these creatures, then perhaps you could try and make friends with them, form alliances, now that would be fun." That particular segment of the review went on to garner huge amusement from the community. Wolfenstein 3D is often referred to as the granddaddy of first-person shooters, but for many, Doom is the game that really set in stone what a modern first-person shooter is. The 1-2 punch of exciting single-player and excellent multiplayer made the game irresistible to many. The fact that shareware pushed the game into the hands of millions made it super easy to play with friends and experience the game itself. Many first-person shooters released in the years after Doom's release and took huge inspiration from its release model and mechanics. This gave rise to the term Doom clone, a term to describe the many first-person shooters looking to emulate the success of Doom. id Software themselves believe that only 1% of people who played the shareware version actually invested in the full game, but they didn't really care. Reportedly, the game sold well enough that the studio was making $100,000 a day in the weeks after the game's release. Within 2 years of launch, Doom reportedly was installed on over 20 million workstations around the world. So strong was the lore of Doom that many workplaces had to instigate rules to stop employees spending their work time playing deathmatch in the game. It was claimed that Doom was installed on more PCs worldwide than Microsoft's Windows 95 operating system. There were even rumours at one point that Microsoft was looking to purchase id Software outright. They didn't in the end, but Bill Gates made no secret of his admiration for Doom.
These games are getting really realistic. Next year I might even play in the big Doom tournament.
Doom as a franchise instantly became one of gaming's tentpole franchises, attracting a huge passionate fanbase that created content and shared creations online. It led to the formation of Doom communities which have persevered and only grown in strength since the game's release. Even to this day, content is being created and released. The likes of Brutal Doom take that core gameplay loop and ramp it up to 11. The likes of Eviternity, Sunlust, and countless other WODs showcase how far Doom's gameplay can be pushed, homing in on that exciting gameplay loop and pushing the boundaries of what Doom is. Then you get the likes of Sonic Robo Blast, something new, entirely built on top of the Doom engine which brings whole new games to the table. Since its release, Doom has gone on to become a multimedia sensation. The franchise has seen the release of novels, comic books, board games, 2 official films and multiple sequels. Across the years, Doom was ported to many home consoles, allowing people who didn't own powerful PCs the chance to experience Doom on their TVs. Some of these were great and others less so, but it's impressive that Doom made its way to so many consoles. In December 1997, John Carmack cemented the legacy of Doom by releasing the source code. The likes of Boom looked to not only keep the original experience of Doom alive, it sought to modernise and bring it to the next level. Future source ports would add in the ability to play at increased resolutions, modernise the mouse controls, and do all kinds of crazy things. In 2007, Doom was selected for preservation by the Library of Congress, and in 2015, the National Museum of Play inducted Doom into its inaugural Video Game Hall of Fame. The game's immense popularity and controversial content also saw it attract controversy. Doom was cited during the 1993 to 1994 United States hearings on video games violence. The game would also be strongly linked to the perpetrators of the Columbine High School massacre in 1999, one of the perpetrators a member of the Doom modding community. The shadow of Columbine hung over Doom for a very long time and brought with it scrutiny that only escalated the discussion around violent video games and their impact on youths. I'm writing this retrospective in 2025, over 30 years after Doom released, yet the game remains as fun to me as the first day I played it back in 1995. The reason for this, I feel, is that Doom understood what it was and played to those strengths. It didn't overextend itself, and the desire by the team at id Software to remove anything that slowed the game down feels justified. The lack of depth in story may be a barrier for some people, but it's probably the reason the game has been so easily modded and adapted over hundreds of thousands of WODs over the years. Put simply, every WOD feels like it could be a story of Doom. Doom will always be that game. It wasn't the first game I ever played, but it's definitely the one that left the biggest impression on me as a gamer. Doom is a game that has its flaws, But it's a game that's influenced many which followed in its shadow. It's a game that cemented id Software among the biggest names in gaming, and it's a game that still surprises, shocks and commands respect to this day. Doom 1 shattered the video game industry, but it's only the beginning of what Doom had in store for gamers.